everyone. Hope you've had a great time attending our sessions and listening to some great insights from our speakers today. And it is now time for the final session of the ETHRWorld Human Capital Experience APAC 2022. I'm delighted to welcome you to this exclusive fireside chat on the topic Ritual Roadmap for Engaged Workforce with Erica Keswin, author, Rituals Roadmap, the human way to transform everyday routines into workplace magic. In this keynote session, best-selling author Erica will share how some of the daily workforce rituals can foster a sense of belonging and help workers connect with one another and their work. You will get some interesting tips for creating a workplace full of engaged, connected employees who drive revenue and stay at their jobs long-term. And it is my pleasure to introduce and invite our speaker, Erica Keswin. Erica is a best-selling author and internationally sought-after speaker and workplace strategist. She helps top-of-the-class businesses, organizations, and individuals improve their performance by honoring relationships in every context, always with an eye toward high-tech for human touch. She was named one of Marshall Goldsmith's top 100 coaches in 2020, as well as one of Business Insider's most innovative coaches of 2020. Her first book, Bring Your Human to Work, 10 Surefire Ways to Design a Workplace That's Good for People, Great for Business, and Just Might Change the World, was published in 2018 by McGraw-Hill. Her second book, Rituals Roadmap, the human way to transform everyday routines into workplace magic, was published by McGraw-Hill in January 2021. Both her books debuted as Wall Street Journal bestsellers. So Erica, thank you so much for joining us for this session. It is a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much.
Great. I'm sure our audience will learn a lot from the insights you would share today. So without any further delay, let me start this conversation with you. And also before we begin, I request our audience members to keep sharing your thoughts and comments in the chat section here. So Erica, can you begin by telling us a little bit more about yourself, your background, what got you interested in rituals and creating a more human employee experience?
Sure. So I've been in the human capital space for about 25 years, which I describe as helping companies improve performance through people. So I've worked as an executive coach, I've worked in human resources consulting, performance management, all different aspects of again, the people side of business. And I wrote Bring Your Human to Work in 2018, which was motivated by what I was seeing in the workplace, which was really predicated upon the impact that technology was having on how people connected at work. You know, pre-pandemic, all of these Zooms and video chats we're having. But at the time, I would go into companies and I would find people calling into meetings from down the hall and being in the office together, but being very separate. And so the idea behind Bring Your Human to Work was really looking at the data and the science around how having a more connected workplace not only was good for people themselves, but was also good for the bottom line. So that book came out, and then I didn't necessarily think I would write another book right away, but I had this epiphany one night when I thought about all the leaders I had interviewed for Bring Your Human to Work. And what I realized was that they weren't necessarily calling them rituals, but the way that they were bringing people together all across the employee experience really were part of their rituals of their companies. And I sort of had this idea and began to reach out to leaders to better understand what they were doing, and that led me to the second book. And the rituals book is really structured all around the employee experience. So it's rituals around onboarding and recruiting and meetings and professional development and all of these different things. And I think the similarity between the two books is that how many of these more people-oriented approaches in the workplace, again, are both good for people, but also really have bottom line implications.
Absolutely agree with you, Erica. I think employee experience, and specifically in the past 2 years, we've seen the results of how employee experience has actually impacted bottom lines, have impacted revenue, business outcomes, and how leaders, irrespective of being HR leaders now, all leaders are making it their key priority to prioritize employee experience in their organization. So thanks for sharing that. So you're speaking a lot about rituals here, and I'd like to know more about that, Erica. What are rituals, and is there an ROI to invest in them in the workplace?
So here's my definition of a ritual. It has three component parts. The first is a ritual is something to which we assign a certain amount of meaning and intention. The second part is that a ritual is typically something that has a regular cadence. It could be something we do every morning. It could be something once a week. It could be once a year, but there is something that is a regular cadence. The third, though, is something I hadn't considered, which is a ritual is something that goes beyond its practical purpose. And so, what do I mean by that? I'm sitting here in my home office, and let's say the lights go out and I light a candle so I can see what I'm doing. That's not a ritual. But if I light a candle every Friday at 5 o'clock to signify the end of the work week and the beginning of the weekend, there's meaning and intention behind that, but I'm not lighting it for any real practical purpose. So that's how I define it, because a lot of these rituals, as you'll see when I share some of the examples, they really fit into that mold of the examples. The second part of your question is the ROI. And as we talked about in the beginning, we're all, many of us listening to this today are in the human resources, human capital field. And oftentimes, hopefully this is in our past, but many people have said to me over the years that this is the soft stuff. And I would venture to say that the soft stuff is really the hard stuff and the more important stuff, especially right now. And so I was determined to show an ROI and to show not only the stories of rituals, but the science. So I created this equation that's called the 3 Ps of rituals. And this is what rituals give us. The first P is that rituals give us a sense of psychological safety and belonging. The second P is a connection to purpose. And when you add those 2 Ps together, you get the third P, which is an increase in performance, thus the science. So I'll give a little bit of color of what I mean by that. When we feel that sense of psychological safety at work, that sense of belonging, collaboration goes up by up to 47%. And when we feel again, that we can be who we are at work, productivity goes up by almost 50%. So the numbers are real. And from a personal and human perspective, when we feel connected to our colleagues, to ourselves, to our boss, to the purpose of the company, our feel-good hormone, our oxytocin goes up, our stress goes down. So again, it's good for us personally and good for us from a work perspective.
Okay, so Erica, great. Thank you so much for sharing those. We hadn't really thought of rituals in such a manner that you just described, very beautifully put through. And as you very nicely said, the rituals are things that we do regularly and we do them intentionally. We do not have to have a practical purpose always, but that's about setting a pace to how you want to approach your people. So very nicely put. Also, the fact that you shared about having psychological safety and purpose will automatically, will automatically take you to better performance. And that's all, not just of organizations, but also of individuals. So that's a great way of looking at how rituals can play a great role in across the employee experience in an organization. So thanks for sharing that. Also, Erica, you just told us that your book Rituals Roadmap maps out rituals across the employee experience. So can you share some of your favorite rituals and their impact?
Yeah, that is a tough question. Like I say, I love all of my 3 children equally. I sort of love all of my different rituals in the book equally, but I will pick out a few favorites. What I love about rituals is that they can come from anywhere. They can come from the top down, the bottom up, the inside out. And so I think some of the best rituals are very organic and authentic, and sometimes they just appear and they stick. So one of my favorites is from the company Allbirds, those cool felt sneakers that you may know of. And the ritual is called 40 at 4. And the way that it came to be was that one of the employees went to the doctor and had a physical, wasn't feeling great. And he came back to the office and he said, you know what, I'm going to make some health goals for myself. And I am going to start doing push-ups between now and the end of the year. And he took the number that he wanted to do and divided them by the number of days left in the year. And to meet his goal, he had to do 40 push-ups a day. And so he started doing them in the office. And then the guy next to him joined and the woman down the hall joined. And before they knew it, everybody was either doing the push-ups or watching people do the push-ups. And it became this ritual called 40 at 4. And I look at it as almost like the healthy version of the smoke break. Thankfully, people aren't really smoking anymore. But the smoke break was a time where people came together and kind of bonded, and they would shoot the breeze and get to know each other as people, and work got done. And so during the pandemic, I was able to reach back out to Allbirds, and that's how also something is a ritual when you really miss it when it's gone. And they continued it, and they would have people video themselves doing the push-ups and sending it out. So, that's one of my favorites. I also think that onboarding is a time and a real opportunity for rituals. And when you think about that equation of the 3 Ps, this is an opportunity to connect people right from the get-go with those values and purpose, the second P of the organization. And one of the companies that I think does that really well is Kind Bar. And what they do is every quarter they bring together all of the new employees, and the former CEO, the founder, Daniel Lubetzky, who's now the executive chairman, still gets involved and talks to all of the new hires about the company and its purpose. His dad was saved by someone in the Holocaust, and always felt like he wanted to give back, and through the kindness that this family had shown to his dad, and that started, and that's really at the essence of what Kind is as an organization. And so, reminding people why they do what they do every day. So that I love. And I just think from an opportunity perspective for people listening, especially in the midst of this great resignation, we spend all of these resources getting people in the door. And what about this idea of onboarding and even re-recruiting and reminding people over time, back to that purpose? And rituals are an amazing vehicle from which to do that.
Wow, those are some great examples, Erica. As you said, that at times it's the purpose of why you do these things that matters the most. Very rightly said. And if and organizations who do not forget to do that and continue it irrespective of what phase you're going through, could be pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, or whether you're working remotely in a hybrid environment or you're working from office. If you can keep these rituals together, it kind of ties together your people, brings them together for some common purpose in the end. So that's some great examples, and I'm sure our audience today would take away a lot from that. So thanks for sharing that. Erica, we are talking about times that we're living in where work is constantly moving from being remote to hybrid to going back to office. So stress continues to be very high, and mental health is increasingly a focus at work. How do you think can leaders create a culture of wellness at work now?
It is so important. And I think this is I wouldn't wish this pandemic on anybody, but I do think it's brought some very important issues to the forefront, mental health and wellness being one of them. I think the first thing to consider is that this is not one size fits all. Wellness is going to mean different things to different people. So one interesting example is from a company called Meetup. The CEO is David Siegel, and he talked to me about how they have a stipend around wellness, and he sort of feels like everybody can use that stipend, that money, that investment in a way that's meaningful to them. So, it could be, getting a massage, it could be getting a meditation app, it could be getting a life coach. And so that is sort of one example where they want to dedicate resources, but everybody can do it sort of the way they want. Another interesting approach that I've been seeing a lot is when a company says, okay, we're going to shut the company down and everybody's going to get the same day off or the same week off. LinkedIn gives everybody the week of July 4th off. Here in the United States, a lot of work's not getting done anyway. So again, it's different for every business. And even at LinkedIn, there are some people that need to work that week, and then they are then given a different week off. But I think, many people have been worried about taking vacation, either because there's nowhere to go, because people aren't traveling as much, or they're worried about job security. And when a company can say, we're going to, they're calling, synchronous days off or something, where everybody shuts down, you feel less guilty about having that time off. So I think there's, I have a podcast, which is called Left to Our Own Devices. And I think when we say left to our own devices, we're not connecting. Left to our own devices, we are not necessarily going to bring wellness into our workplaces. So it's less about exactly what you do, but it's more about being extremely intentional about doing something.
Absolutely. I think wellness has become such a key focus area that you have to become intentional about it. You no longer can just make it as, something that you can do in your free time or something. You have to focus on it with a real intention there. So some great examples that you shared. I think if leaders could encourage people to do that more, because the boundaries between life and work have actually become much more blurred than they were earlier. So if leaders can, encourage employees to take those days off, focus on their wellness, I think that culture will get created, and that's how they'll follow it through and create a great employee experience. So thanks for sharing that, Erica. So Erica, the world is at an interesting inflection point around the question of RTO, which again we spoke of as the return to the office. We have taken 2 steps forward, but 1 step back. So what are things that leaders should focus on and avoid, focus on and also avoid in designing a return to office plan, according to you?
It's, there's a couple of ways to think about it. Again, it's about being intentional. Here's what you don't want, which I'm calling a recipe for resentment. So the recipe for resentment is when you tell people to come back into the office and they're commuting and it takes them a long time, and then they get there and no one from their team is there, and they could be doing the kind of work that they were doing at home. So that's what we don't want. So as we do bring people back into the office, it needs to be purposeful. So it could be we're bringing people in on a day where you have your one-on-ones with your manager. It could be that you're bringing people in on a day where you're doing team building and bonding. It could be that you're onboarding new people. It could be that you're having a big strategy whiteboarding session. These are all things that are better done in person. Now, some people listening might say, well, we've hired people all over the country or all over the world or all over Asia, and we can't do this. And so then you need to think about, well, then maybe we could do it once a quarter. I'm not sitting here saying this is exactly what your cadence needs to be, but what I am saying is that from a business and bottom line perspective, if we don't figure out creative ways to bring people together, I do think over time there's going to be increased turnover because, you meet somebody, on public transportation or at a cocktail party or at a conference, and they say, oh, Yasmin, come work at my company and I'll pay you a little bit more. And you say, well, okay, I'm not really that connected to anybody I work with anyway. I might as well. And so it behooves leaders, everybody listening today, to identify ways for people to really be connected. And we're so sick of Zoom. I mean, it's great that I'm here and I'm able to be a part of this, via technology, but at some point there's diminishing returns and it's just not enough.
Absolutely. I think the great point that you made, Erica, on how it should not be a recipe for resentment. I think that's what leaders really need to think about. You cannot bring people back to office just for the heck of it. They have to have a purpose from bringing them together. And obviously, how do you keep them connected, no matter where they're working from? Even at this point, some of them might come to office, some of them might continue working from home, but building those meaningful connections for your people, it's going to be very important for leaders. So thanks for sharing that, Erica. And now it's time for a final concluding question for the sessions, Erica. So how do people listening get started in creating their own rituals roadmap for their organization or their team?
So when I was writing the book, I came up with this question. Now I refer to it, the magic question. And, because even after when I was writing the book and I would explain to people what a ritual is and the ROI and where it give them examples, some people still weren't sure what their company rituals were. So when I asked this question, 9 times out of 10, all of a sudden they would get the light bulb moment of, I got it, that's our ritual. So the magic question is, now I still hope all of you listening today buy the book and let me know what you think about it. But I will share the question anyway. So the question is, and I asked this to Marisa Andrada, who's the head of HR at Chipotle. Okay, Marisa, when do employees at Chipotle feel most Chipotle-ish, most connected? And yes, I will say it's a very techie question, or when do employees at Google feel most Google-ish, or, whatever that is. And when people answered, people would say, oh, it's during that time we come together at the end of the year and give this award, or, oh, it's during onboarding. And so, if you really aren't sure, ask the people around you and see what they say. If people still don't know, that gives you this idea of, oh, I think we need to create some rituals. So when you're creating some, map out your employee experience. And, when you read the book, you'll see there's rituals in meetings. At Eileen Fisher, for example, they ring a chime before every meeting. Again, it could be onboarding, it could be professional development. And the last thing I would say is, if you're looking for a place to start, I often say that beginnings and endings are what I call prime rituals real estate, real opportunities. So the beginning of an ending of a project, the beginning of an ending of an offsite, of a meeting. I think when in doubt, those are always great places to start.
Wow, Erica, great. Those are some great suggestions. I'm sure our audience listening in today will have a lot to take away from that. Rituals are, I think, a much required aspect at the workplace today, especially when we're working in different working environments. You have to have those rituals in place. And as you very rightly said all through the conversation today, they have to be intentional, they have to be purposeful. And at the end, they do bring that ROI to business, but when they impact performance of organizations and of individuals. So thanks for giving those suggestions. It's a very good idea to start from the beginnings or the ends. That's where you begin with. So when you're hiring your people, when you're doing something new, how do you bring in that ritual at that point in time? I think that's works very well. And rituals, as you said very nicely, have a cadence to them, and that's what leaders should focus on going forward. Make them again intentional, make them purposeful, make them have a cadence to them, and overall map out your employee experience and create those touch points where these rituals will really, really work. So thank you so much, Erica, for joining us. It was beautiful listening to you, and I'd urge our readers to buy Erica's book and find out more on how you can create those intentional, meaningful rituals for your organization. So once again, Erica, it was really, really nice talking to you. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for the invitation.
Great, thank you. And for our audience, please, thank you so much for joining us. Hope you've enjoyed being with us and experiencing the many learning sessions all through the day today. Do join us for the closing note of this summit coming up next. So see you all there. Thank you once again.